Puck around and find out.
So we're only a week into the 2023-24 NHL season, and everybody's got their hot takes, of course. I'm not really going to engage in any of that because the sample size is just so limited. There's not a whole lot we can glean from individual player or even individual team performances. A lot of people are already writing off my Caps and saying they're 1-2, they look awful, they're one of the worst offensive teams in the NHL. They're just going to be that way for the entire year, and they're going to be in the Macklin-Celebrini sweepstakes. But I'm still holding out hope because it's only been 3 games. They have a completely new head coach. They're learning a new system, and they did also overhaul a fair bit of the roster. So I won't be really panicking, and I don't think any NHL teams should be panicking until the end of October, because as the old saying goes, you don't win the Stanley Cup in October, but you sure can lose it. But I'll counter by saying I don't think you really lose the Stanley Cup until at least 10 games into the season, so a lot of hockey left to be played. But one thing I did want to touch on is the biggest aspect that a lot of teams and fan bases kind of take for granted, and that's consistency. Consistency in the front office, consistency behind the bench, consistency in the roster. If you've ever been the new kid at a school or you've started a new job, you know those first few, not just days, but weeks and sometimes even months can be a big adjustment period. You aren't just learning about the new people, the new faces, you're learning a whole new routine. How do I get to work every day? Where do I go? When do I go there? Who am I meeting with? Even after you kind of get a routine down, you start to learn, oh, maybe I should be doing this instead of that, or I should be doing this at this time, structuring my day in a different way. These are the people that I should try to work with. These are the people that I should avoid. These are the things I should do at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, etc. And that goes the same for NHL players and NHL teams. When you have the structure that is consistent from year to year, that is such a huge boon to your team because you have all of those people who have been there for years, who know the routine, who know the system, who can help the other players who are new learn. And it's big when you have that for the players because, again, they don't have to go through the whole, buy a new house, move in, learn the new area, find the school for their kids, the restaurants, and the gas stations and all that stuff that they need on their day-to-day basis. But it's even bigger for the coaches because, when you're a coach, you come into the NHL, you're trying to implement your idea and your system. And teaching that to a new group of players is always going to be a challenge. There's always going to be a learning curve. And then add on top of that, if you're a new NHL coach who's in a completely new city, and so throw on top of that all of the same things that a player has to do, find the school. And then if you're a first-time head coach or a very young head coach doing this for the first time, you have to put all of that together and then add on top of it, you're learning how to be a coach in the NHL for the first time. You're learning how to deal with superstars. Before you might have been a coach in juniors or minors or college, and in those situations, you probably had an inordinate amount of power. You were dealing with mostly younger players. In the NHL, you're not just dealing with probably some players who are your age or maybe even older. You're dealing with, in some cases, stars or superstars, guys who have been in the league for years, who have been in the NHL maybe longer than you have. And that can be very intimidating. And so it's going to take teams with new coaches, especially young coaches, especially first-time head coaches, a bit of time to get revved up. And I actually went through and I looked at the coaching situations and how they've done. Again, this is a very brief sample size. It's only been, 3, 4, or 5 games for each team. But of the teams who have a coach who is a first-time NHL head coach, this is their first head coaching gig in the NHL, their teams so far have a combined record of 4 wins, 6 losses, and 1 OT shootout loss. For teams that have a brand new head coach, somebody who has coached in the NHL but is new to their team, so, was coaching somewhere else last year, now is the coach of this new team for the first year, is still adjusting to the new spot, the new city. It's just 2 coaches, Brunette and Laviolette. They have a combined record of 3 wins and 4 losses. So better than the first-time head coaches, but still slightly under 500. And then for NHL teams with a returning coach who's been there a few years, so at least 2 years, those coaches have a combined record 21 wins, 19 losses, 6 OT shootout losses. So above 500. And granted, those are a lot of guys who have been very successful in the past and are on good teams. So guys like Rod Brindamore, Jay Woodcroft, also guys like Todd McClellan. There's still some guys who are on teams that were not so good last year. Mike Sullivan's Penguins missed the playoffs. EJ Smith's Senators missed the playoffs last year. But these are still guys that have a huge advantage, in my opinion, in that they're back in a spot that they know. They don't have to go through learning all the new names, all the new faces, all the new routines. In a lot of cases, these are players that they've been working with for several years. They've been able to install their systems. And so, naturally, these are teams that, they might be just better on paper. And that's in part because these coaches might just be more talented coaches. But it really goes to show, in my opinion, that in the beginning, you have to give these new coaches some time to adjust. I would say probably every coach deserves at least a year, unless you're just like a complete dumpster fire like Mike Babcock looked like. But don't get too down on your, first-time head coach just because they're struggling right now. It's kind of to be expected. And even if you have a young team, with a lot of guys who are making their NHL debuts, or a lot of guys who were brought in from different cities, if they're taking some time to adjust, give them a little bit of slack, because just like with the coaches, they have to relearn their whole routines. They have to learn how to play in the NHL. If they're a new player, a younger player, they have to learn, how things work in this new organization. If they're coming in from somewhere else, the expectations might be different. The coaching style might be different. But this is why, in my opinion, what teams should strive for, and why the best teams, of the past few decades, they've maintained a core and made changes around the fringes. And while it's always tempting to, want to say blow it up after, things go wrong, when you can hold on to a core, there is something to be said about the sort of advantage it gives to you. 1 week into the NHL season, how are the teams stacking up? It's our first installment of the Power Puck Pyramid. That's right, instead of doing a typical power rankings where I go through teams 1 through 32, I'm doing a power pyramid, which is basically a tier list of the different teams, going from the best to the worst, and grouping them up in terms of how I think they are doing this year. I will let you know that I am tracking the teams via an ELO calculator based on how I projected them to finish during the preseason. So their changes week to week will be based on that. And this is based on their ELOs as of my recording, which is October 19th. So they're not current to the results of Thursday afternoon and evening's games. Now, most of the teams are exactly where they were at the beginning of the year because we've only played 3 to 4 games for most of these teams. But I'll just go through the teams that have impressed / overperformed and underperformed so early into the year. So we'll start at the top. The Toronto Maple Leafs remain the number 1 team in the NHL. They're 2-1 on the season, but that one loss coming to the lowly Chicago Blackhawks is slightly concerning. But the fact of the matter is that Arvid Soderblom, the Chicago Blackhawks goaltender, just had an absolutely outstanding game against the Leafs, stopping 35 of 36 shots. Now in that second tier, we have the Edmonton Oilers, Colorado Avalanche, and Dallas Stars, the 3 best teams in the West, who have a combined 2 losses between them in the first week of the season. Unfortunately, both of those losses belong to the Edmonton Oilers. It was quite the rough week for the Oilers, who have given up 13 goals in their first 3 games, and their starting goaltender Stuart Skinner has posted a mind-blowingly bad .750 save percentage through 2 games, with a .533 GAA. Tier 3, aka the Contenders tier, we have the Carolina Hurricanes, Boston Bruins, New York Rangers, Vegas Golden Knights, Minnesota Wild, and Vancouver Canucks. The standout in this group, who were the biggest riser in ELO this week, coming off the back of a hot 4-0 start that included wins over teams like the Sharks, Kraken, and Ducks. Okay, when I say it like that, it doesn't sound that impressive, but they did manage to beat the Stars in a shootout, so at least they have that going for them, and they didn't lose any of these extremely winnable games. Aiden Hill seems determined to make me look like a horse's ass by posting a .951 save percentage over his first 3 starts. Now, one team in this tier that has gotten off to a rocky start, rockier than expected, is the Carolina Hurricanes. They had a very easy schedule to open this season. Their first 4 games were against Ottawa, the LA Kings, the Ducks, and the Sharks. Now, they did manage to beat the Sharks and the Kings in a shootout, but they lost to the Ducks. And they also lost to the Ottawa Senators, who were the toughest team on their schedule. Carolina is a team that I thought going into this year was going to be a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. And I think that they still definitely can be that. And the good news is it's very easy to identify the problem for Carolina thus far. It's between the pipes. Antti Raanta and Frederik Andersen have each played 2 games. Raanta has a save percentage of .838. Andersen has a save percentage of .855. Raanta has a save percentage of .838. In those first 4 games, they have allowed 5, 6, 6, and 6 goals. That just ain't going to cut it. I mean, Carolina is not exactly a defensive stalwart of a team, but they are better than most. They're giving up the 3rd fewest shots against per game and still getting 5 or 6 goals scored against them. That's just unacceptable. And I don't think that this is sustainable. I think that eventually Raanta and Andersen are going to come back to earth, and by which I mean come back to the surface of the earth from 6 feet underground. But very, very disappointing that the Carolina Hurricanes have gotten off to such a rocky start, considering they're starting off against such an easy schedule. 3-1 to start is not terrible. They're still very much out in front of everybody. In those 4 games, they've given up 3, 5, 6, and 3 goals. They need their goaltending to step up and be more consistent this year if they want a chance. Down in the 4th tier, kind of the soup of contending quote-unquote teams, we got the Winnipeg Jets, Ottawa Senators, New York Islanders, New Jersey Devils, Nashville Predators, Pittsburgh Penguins, St. Louis Blues, Calgary Flames, and the Washington Capitals. So down in this tier, we have the biggest drop of the season so far, belonging to the Nashville Predators. Preds are 1-3 through their first 4 games, and it has not been the easiest of schedules for the Predators. They played both the Oilers and the Bruins, who they lost to, along with the Kraken, who they beat. But taking that loss to the Tampa Bay Lightning to start off the season really hurt them. Just kind of unfortunate how the schedule shook out, so I'm not too worried about Nashville quite yet. I would like to see UC Saros playing a little bit better, and maybe them to get more consistent scoring, but I'm not pushing the panic button on Nashville yet. One team I might be pushing the panic button on is the Winnipeg Jets. This was a team that I pretty comfortably thought was going to be in the playoffs. They have lost to Calgary and LA, giving up at least 5 goals in those games, and in their win over Florida, they gave up 4 goals. And to be honest, a lot of this is on Connor Hellebuyck. After getting paid, he has not looked great. He's at an .843 save percentage through 3 games. Just like the Hurricanes, the Jets need to get some better goaltending, but it's going to hurt double for the Canes, considering that they don't have as potent an offense as Carolina does, and the fact that their goaltender, Hellebuyck, not only just got paid, but is a guy that you expect to be able to carry the load. So Winnipeg, if Connor Hellebuyck doesn't straighten things up, this is going to be rough for y'all. But I have confidence that he will. Hellebuyck is a hell of a goalie. He's one of the top 5 in the NHL. I think he'll get it going soon. And then 2 teams that have overperformed in this tier are the New York Islanders and Ottawa Senators. I was bullish on Ottawa this year. I predicted they'd make the playoffs, and they have looked absolutely the part so far. And especially Vlad Tarasenko looks like he might be the best offseason acquisition of any team. 6 points in his first 4 games, including 2 goals. Between him, Stützle, Tkachuk, and a resurgent Claude Giroux, this team has a great offense, and they're getting some good contributions from their defense. Like Norris had a couple goals, Chychrun had a 2-goal game, Sanderson has 2 goals on the year. It is just an incredibly well-balanced Ottawa team, and they are rolling. Ditto for the Islanders, whose step defense and great goaltending have been reasons for their success so far. They have allowed the fewest shots against per game in the NHL. They've only played 2 games, but Ilya Sorokin has been fantastic in both of them. The Islanders have allowed very few shots against him. He hasn't had to make many saves, and as a result, they've only given up 2 goals in the 2 games that they've played. And then we go down to the gutter, the bottom-dwelling teams, the Buffalo Sabres, Detroit Red Wings, Florida Panthers, Tampa Bay Lightning, Seattle Kraken, Montreal Canadiens, San Jose Sharks, Columbus Blue Jackets, Philadelphia Flyers, Arizona Coyotes, LA Kings, Anaheim Ducks, and Chicago Blackhawks. I'll talk about the Blackhawks just because there's a ton of intrigue around them, specifically around Connor Bedard. Bedard so far has looked fine. I think he's not playing to the level of the hype that he is getting, and that's more a product of the fact that the hype is astronomical, and he has just played pretty good. You know, Bedard has 1 goal and 3 points in 4 games. That's not bad, but it's not to the level that, you know, ESPN and TSN are all hyping him up to be. And I'm not calling him a bust or anything because it's only been 4 games, but I will say from what I have seen of Connor Bedard, I haven't seen yet the him factor, for lack of a better term. Like, I haven't seen that shift or that sequence of events where I'm just like, oh, he is different. Like, he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not saying he isn't him and he can't be him. But just in what I have seen, I have not seen something that stands out as like, oh, this is a guy who is just on a completely different level. Like you see out of Ovechkin, McDavid, Auston Matthews. Again, it's only been 4 games, so he could just be needing some more time to adjust, and we could see that him sequence coming up. But so far, through 4 games, again, want to really caveat, it's only been 4 games, so I'm not saying he's a bust or even not going to be a great player. I just have not seen it yet. Now, one team down in this soup that has been very impressive to me is the Detroit Red Wings. They're 3-1 to start the season. They have managed to beat the Tampa Bay Lightning without Vasilevsky, the Penguins, and the Blue Jackets, so they haven't beaten world beaters. They did also lose to the New Jersey Devils, as probably would be expected. But still, it's very impressive that the Red Wings are 3-1. Alex DeBrincat looks absolutely amazing. Like I said in the offseason, this is a huge coup by Stevie Y to get him. He's leading the NHL with 8 points. And I didn't predict that the Red Wings would make the playoffs, and right now that's looking pretty suspect because they are playing much better than I anticipated. It is still early, so there's a lot of hockey left to be played. They can come down to earth, but one thing I will pat myself on the back is I got a lot of criticism for saying that Ville Husso is not a good goalie. In the 3 games he has played this year, he's allowed 4 goals, and 3 goals. He has a save percentage of .881. That is 45th in the NHL. Again, small sample size. He could bounce back. Fully possible. But it was James Reimer who managed to hold down the fort in their shutout win over the Blue Jackets. And honestly, I think the winning ways will continue in Detroit. They have Ottawa next, but after that, they've got Calgary, Seattle, Winnipeg. 3 very winnable games before they got to start playing some tougher teams like Boston and the Islanders. So I could definitely see the Detroit Red Wings ending October with a winning record. And then finally, I'll go and close this out with another one of my I told you so teams, which is the Seattle Kraken. 0-3-1 through their first 4 games. They have the worst goal differential of any team in the NHL so far. They have given up 13 goals in their 4 games. And now it's not all gone. Gruari has a 909 save percentage in his 3 starts this year. They've also played 2 very tough teams in Vegas and Colorado. But they also went ahead and lost to both the Blues and the Predators, who have both been teams that have struggled so far this year. So I said before the year, Seattle's probably not going to make the playoffs, and I do feel confident in that. They are also, quite frankly, a team that is having trouble scoring. They only have 1 player with 2 points on the year, and they've played 4 games. So that's a big yikes for Seattle. Now let's give us some superlatives from last week's NHL action. Auston Matthews scored 6 goals in his first 2 games, a couple of hat tricks, which gives him our first ever Big Puck Energy Award of the week. Not only is Matthews having a monster start to this year, but what's impressed me the most is that he's found multiple different ways to score the goal. Of course, he has that lethal wrist shot and that snapper, but he's also found some wraparounds and backhanders, and he's shown off his handles a little bit in his first year. This is a guy who looks like he is on a mission after he signed that big extension in the offseason. It's not all bad for the Oilers. They did rebound to beat the Nashville Predators in a game where Connor McDavid scored the most what-the-what goal of the week. Toasty! Save of the week is going to the Arizona Coyotes goaltender Connor Ingram, who is a proud soldier in the fight to make the New York Rangers look as terrible as possible. For that, we thank you, Mr. Ingram. The Apple Bottom Gene Award of the week goes to Riley Gregg of the Ottawa Senators, who made an absolutely disgusting catch and between the legs pass that set up Vlad Tarasenko for a pretty goal against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Dangle of the week going to Jack Eichel of the Vegas Golden Knights as he walked through the entire Anaheim Ducks defense for an easy as pie goal. At one point, he didn't even use his hands because, let's be honest, he's playing the Ducks, and that would be a little bit overkill. Chris Kyle Award for Snipe of the Week going to Nick Schmaltz of the Arizona Coyotes. Off of a great feed from Logan Cooley, Schmaltz had to fit that puck into a tight space like a high school quarterback, finally getting lucky on prom night. Laser-like precision to give the Arizona Coyotes that goal. The Crush into Oblivion hit of the week going to, of course, Alexander Ovechkin. In his first game of the season facing the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Caps may have lost, but Alex Ovechkin sent a message to Erik Karlsson. Welcome to the fucking show.
Who that? Who there?
Dumbass of the Week award is going to be shared by a pair, Ryan Reeves Me Alone and Katy Perry, sniping back and forth like Taylor Swift and Selena Gomez. It was a war of words that ultimately never led to some fists, although I will credit Ryan Reeves. If it was up to him, it would be fists first, just like most of his Saturday nights. Don't worry, girls, we all think you're the prettiest one of the bunch, and I'm sure Brad will sit next to both of you in social studies. And then finally, in the Cackling Laugh award, we got Tony D'Angelo, who got flattened by one of the officials. I'm surprised Tony D'Angelo didn't call him a slur and threaten to fuck his mother after this grave injustice.